everyone, this is Austin of the Noobs and Knockouts podcast. I'm placing this message at the beginning of our first 4 episodes for future context and new listeners. These episodes are presented unedited, and in our first 2 episodes, some issues with our recording methods caused part of the beginning of the episode and part of the beginning of the back half to get cut off, and we sincerely apologize. In addition, the name for our podcast was not nailed down until after the recording of the 4th episode, and that is reflected in the episodes. With that out of the way, please enjoy. Right this time. Welcome to the newest episode of Austin and David Watch Wrestling. I'm Austin. That is me. I've watched a lot of wrestling. That is David. He has not watched any wrestling.
I'm David. That is me. I have not watched any wrestling. No.
And so we're gonna watch some wrestling later and talk about it here on stream.
Yes.
All right. And so
we got our episode 1 done. Kind of gives you the formula of how we run this thing. So
and so I'm gonna start with a little bit of a poem to set the mood for the evening. Oh, don't give us none of your aggravation. We had it with your discipline. Oh, Saturday night's all right for fighting. Get a little action in. Get about as oiled as a diesel train. Gonna set this dance alight. Saturday night's the night I like. Saturday night's all right, all right, all right. Ooh. Because today we shall watch the October 3rd, 1987 edition of Saturday Night's Main Event. So now I get to explain what that means and go into a way too deep history into wrestling to understand how that happened. So,
Spooktober. We're month appropriate today.
Oh, we are. Because there are Halloween themed shows of wrestling, and most of them are shitty. But they're also pay-per-views, so they're kind of long. But now for Spooktober, nothing spookier than bad wrestling.
Yes.
But anyway, Saturday night's main event. Saturday night's main event was WWE having a semi-regular show, like special event shows on NBC. And this is kind of significant, is that this is one of only, from what I can think of, 3 different times where wrestling was broadcast on over the air broadcast network TV. The first time being the 1950s, kind of the dawn of TV. That was one of the wrestling was one of the early popular shows on old TV because it was also cheap content to make. You just got to take a camera and go film the local wrestling show. The second time is this time now in the mid 1980s. And the third time is right now. WWE airs Friday Night SmackDown on Fox right now. So, So Saturday night's main event kind of came about because basically right now WWE is kind of in the middle of one of its biggest boom periods of all time. The mid 1980s, basically they got Hulk Hogan is at his peak popularity. They're teaming up with celebrities like Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper. They're doing shows on MTV, and this is like a real brush with pop culture relevance for WWE. And then 1987 is kind of like we're dead smack in the middle of this. They got a show. Vince McMahon is good friends with Dick Ebersol, and he's got a show on NBC doing monster ratings, by the way. One of these shows is one of the most watched wrestling shows of all time. And if we watch a second episode, which I have queued up, but we don't know if we're going to do that for time purposes, it is the most watched episode of wrestling television ever at 33 million viewers.
Ooh.
So they're going nuts. And basically right about this is I guess I wanted to give a little bit of history as how WWE got so popular so fast. And so basically what happened is that back in the olden times, before the mid-1980s, is wrestling was super regionalized. Or as I like to call it, it was a cartel. Because it was dominated by the National Wrestling Alliance which was basically all the local like regional major wrestling promoters. I'm not going to list them all off. It's not relevant right now, but there was a lot of them all across the country. The Ohio actually didn't have a major wrestling company at the time. It kind of followed with Georgia Championship Wrestling, but again, just thought that was a fun factoid to say. But anyway, these guys basically all got together and were like, what if we, instead of trying to be directly competitive with each other, we all kind of stay in our own lanes. We can swap talent. We can all make money. And the big thing the big thing they all decided on was the NWA World Champion, who would be a traveling performer. He would be a champion all across the country, and all the regional shows would have their own regional champions, and people step up to fight the NWA champion. But yeah, I call it a cartel because they all agreed, they all conspired to not compete against each other and just stay regional monopolies. And then Vince McMahon Jr.
Sure.
Yeah. And then Vince McMahon Jr. came along and was like, fuck that, though. When he took over the WWF, as at the time, the World Wrestling Federation, which they changed to WWE because in the early 2000s, the World Wildlife Fund sued them over that, and they lost, so they changed their name. And but they're the WWF, and Vince McMahon, he sees that that he has a real opportunity here. He's got the money and the resources, and he all just to kind of get started, because he was in charge of the WWF was in the New York market. Like their home, like if they had they had like a home stadium, it's Madison Square Garden. So he's in a really good market on its own. He's already in a pretty powerful position financially, but he sees an opportunity to go national, to kind of be a nationwide company. And so he kind of tells the NWA to fuck off. He's going to do his own thing now. And it works for a couple of reasons. Is first of all, Vince McMahon is a ruthless businessman at heart. There are plenty of stories from the era of him just like he would like contact every member of a company's roster, and he would pay to buy all their contracts out. A whole roster, top guys, jobbers, don't care. I'll sign them and leave you with nobody. Fuck you. And he would go to TV. He would even go to TV providers and be like, "Oh, hey, I see that you got this wrestling show on here. I will let you broadcast. You can broadcast my show for cheaper. You'll get better ratings and make more money." And he undercut him like that. And so that was part of it, is that he was ruthless, and he's going to destroy the NWA piece by piece. The other thing is that a lot of the second thing is part of what made this so successful is this is right around the time when cable TV is blowing up. Like he jumped on he got WWF in that MTV train right when MTV was really exploding in popularity. Like he got getting Cyndi Lauper during the Girls Just Want to Have Fun phase, and getting Mr. T aligned during when he was on the A-Team was kind of huge.
Damn.
That's
nuts.
Oh yeah, it is the thing. It is nuts to think about, because WWE doesn't brush up with real pop culture very often. So when they do, it kind of can get pretty wild.
Real pop culture.
I mean, yeah, WWE doesn't have its finger on.
Well, no, I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like what we talked about last week, with it kind of like living in its own little bubble.
Yeah,
I get what you mean.
It's usually pretty niche, and it's funny to. And then I guess the third thing is, to be fair, it's not just like WWE just ran in there and killed all of them. Some of it was self-inflicted wounds, because kind of the way that the business landscape was going, it was going to go national probably one way or the other. And some of these old timer wrestling promoters, they weren't ready for that, or they didn't really know how to make the adjustment. Mm-hmm. And so from being a regional show to being like a national show, and they just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
He didn't kill all of them, and if we ever do a show outside of WWE from around this time, I'll probably talk more about that. But he effectively did become the national brand in wrestling, for sure. And so, yeah, so that's kind of like how we got to where we are now, where he's on NBC. I did forgot to say is that 3 years in 1985, he kind of really explodes with WrestleMania, which was a closed circuit show, and it did bangers numbers. That was headlined by Hulk Hogan and Mr. T in a tag teaming together in a tag team match. It did bonkers. And so WrestleMania, then skip ahead to 87 is WrestleMania, and this kind of ties into where the players are at this point, who the major players are at this point. 1987, the big feud was Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant.
Oh man!
Because you're in for heel Andre on this show. Because he had in the for the Hogan feud, he had turned heel. They basically did this story where Andre the Giant was undefeated for 15 years. That is actually made up bullshit. He's lost plenty of times, but not part of the story. He's undefeated his whole career, and he's never been WWF champion because he was friends with Hogan. He didn't want to take Hogan's championship, so he was polite about it. But then the villainous Bobby Heenan, who was a manager, who was one of the major managers at the time, and he got in Andre's ear and told him, you're Andre the Giant. You're unbeaten for 15 years. You deserve to be champion, not Hogan. Bobby Heenan was obsessed with beating Hulk Hogan and having one of his clients take the championship away from him. And this was his newest ploy to do so.
Ooh.
Is to sick Andre the Giant on him. And it was a pretty intense feud, and it culminated at WrestleMania 3 in the main event, where the story was, man, can Hogan do it? Can he slay the undefeatable Giant? And it's one of the more iconic images in WWE lore, is at the end of the match, Hulk Hogan picks up Andre the Giant, all 500 pounds of him, and body slams him, and is able to get the win, 1, 2, 3, and beat the unkillable Giant.
Oh my God.
I don't know if we'll ever watch that match because it's honestly not great, but it is a fantastic moment in time to watch and see for historical relevance for sure. And so Hulk Hogan's still the WWF champion at this point, but Andre still wants a piece of that gold. And I guess a little bit of a spoiler for where this is going in case we do the second episode is that Andre eventually drops Bobby Heenan because, Heenan's not getting him anywhere. And instead, he aligns himself with the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase, gimmick is exactly what you think it is, to be honest. He is the rich asshole. He's and he kind of got bigger in making the audience do degrading things for money, except he'd screw them out of the money while they're doing it. Probably the most famous of these scenes is he brings out this little kid and he's like, if you dribble this basketball 10 times, I will give you $100. And the kid dribbles the ball 1, 2, 3, 4, and he gets to 9, and then DiBiase kicks the ball out from under him before he can dribble it a 10th time. And then he's like, oh, well, sorry, too bad. Tough luck, kid.
Oh, no.
No, he was an asshole.
That's awful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
No, he do shit like that. And so DiBiase has his own sights on becoming WWF champion. I will say is that this episode, at least both these episodes, but especially this one, we're going to get to see some problematic racial representation here. In Ted DiBiase's case, he had a black man as a manservant named Virgil.
Oh no!
And he spends his whole time degrading Virgil and treating him like crap and making him and making him wait on him hand and foot, and it's all very uncomfortable to look back on in any way.
Uh,
Now, this did end up paying off into a story where Virgil finally doesn't take this abuse anymore, but that's like years away from that from right now. So we just get to see him just be the
it's
loyal
stupid.
servant.
Oh, God. Yikes.
Yeah, big yikes. So that's kind of the WWF Championship scene at this time right now. It's basically Hulk Hogan. He's not defending against Andre in this first episode, but that is his primary like rival at the time. And then the next thing to talk about is the Intercontinental Championship, which at this time was the number 2 championship in WWE. This time there was only 3 belts. It was WWF Championship, the Intercontinental Championship, and the Tag Team Championship. And the Intercontinental belt was truly like the number 2 belt. Like it was a big deal to be the Intercontinental Champion. You were the number 2 guy. And so right now, the Intercontinental Champion is the Honky Tonk Man. The Honky Tonk Man.
The honky?
Yep. His gimmick is he's an Elvis impersonator who is either too dumb or too arrogant to understand that he's doing an Elvis impersonation. Like he genuinely believes he's an original talent and super talented, and he doesn't see the parallels despite dressing like Elvis, talking like Elvis, and having Elvis's hair. He doesn't ever understand when people are like, you look like Elvis, right? And he's like, who?
Oh, God.
He's actually kind of funny, but he's also a cheating dickhead asshole who never wins straight up. He always cheats to win. And so he's the
Fair enough.
Yeah, so he's the Intercontinental Champion. And right now, his biggest rival, the Macho Man, Randy Savage. Because
Dang, we got all the big guys around
I know
here.
we do. I was like, oh man, there's not a whole lot of major players in these episodes, but the ones we do have, these are legends to talk. So the Macho Man, Randy Savage, this is kind of his ascent in WWE. They'd always kind of treat him as a big deal, but he kind of broke out in WrestleMania 3 when his championship match with then champion Ricky Steamboat. Actually, excuse me, no, he was the Intercontinental Champion at the time, and the challenger was Ricky Steamboat. And like a lot of people, like you're going to see a lot of people like talk about that match as one of the greatest of all time because and it was a really good match. And it was basically like the first time in WWE had a super athletic kind of match like that. Because right now in WWE, at this point in time, they're kind of like, they're trying to be the land of the giants. These big, tall, muscly, steroided up men, even though they didn't admit to that at the time. They're doing the roids.
Yeah.
They're out there. They're there to do punches and strong stuff. But they're not super like athletic or fast or anything like that. And Steamboat and Savage are both incredible athletes in that way. And so the match they were putting on for WWF in the 1980s was like mind-blowing to see dudes do this kind of stuff in a match. And so that was kind of his breakout moment. Now he's kind of he's trying to get the Intercontinental title back from now the Honky Tonk Man who beat Ricky Steamboat for it.
Yeah.
And this is kind of he will eventually be a top tier like WWF champion in the company. And this is part of his rise to being that. I don't know how much of a role it plays, but I guess it is important to say like his character at this point is I think he's kind of heelish. He's always been kind of heelish especially because like a big character trait of his is that he has his manager, Miss Elizabeth, who is his real life wife, and that's why she was his valet. But on screen, it was at this time a purely professional role. But he was always kind of abusive to her. Like he'd talk over her. He'd sometimes physically pull her around, including in front of like when he was a full blown heel. He would do the move where like a guy was trying to hit him, and he'd pull Liz in front of him because the babyface isn't going to hit a woman, so they can't hit Savage. Like he was a dick, and that was kind of the story. Is like you hate Savage because you see how he treats Elizabeth, and you're like, Elizabeth deserves better, please. Like she needs to get away.
Jesus.
But like as they started to pull the babyface turn, they really downplayed a lot of that. Obviously.
Well, yeah, Jesus.
Oh yeah, no. So, but otherwise, yeah, Macho Man is kind of what you'd expect in that he is super loud and yells a lot. But which kind of covers a lot of what wrestling.
Yeah.
When it comes to like wrestling promos of this time, especially at the top, that was what a lot of that was, is big muscly guys yelling. but you bought into it. I don't know for sure, but I'm really hoping one of Hulk Hogan's clearly cocaine fueled rants is on this show, because they're some of my favorite from this era, with my all-time favorite always being at WrestleMania 4, which was at Trump Plaza. And he talks about how he's going to body slam Andre the Giant through a fault line and call in Atlantic City, and he's going to cause an earthquake, and it's going to cause mass flooding. And Donald Trump is going to be hanging on for dear life, and he's going to give up all of his material possessions to save his family, because by God, he is a Hulkamaniac, brother. Which was absurd nonsense to say even in 1988, but now it's even funnier. And it's fun times to listen to Hulk Hogan ramble on about like this. So hopefully he rants and raves like he does in this episode. Macho Man does that too. He also yells and screams.
But naturally.
But he's super charismatic, and everybody loved it. So I guess I'll say that the tag team
what got him a beef jerky commercial deal.
Oh yeah, step into a Slim Jim. Oh yeah. Also love doing Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage impersonations. They're super easy to do. So
oh man, oh wait, Hulk Hogan. Oh no. Anyway,
I'm gonna slam them. Listen here, dude. I'm gonna slam the big giant, brother. He's gonna go down 1, 2, 3 for the leg drop kick. And then I'll tell my daughter she can't date black guys.
Look, this is. I'm sure this is an irrelevant side story that I will divulge to our audience in full at a later date.
I know partially where this is going, and I want it to go there.
All I'm going to say is the name Hulk Hogan has been eternally tainted for me due to a very bizarre patron at one of my jobs. And I get very I just kind of made the connection. Oh wait, yeah, this guy exists, and we're watching a Hulk Hogan match. Oh no!
Oh yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah. Again, that'll be some hashtag bonus content for later on. I'll explain my Hulk Hogan story, but at least the name Hulk Hogan gives me like Vietnam flashbacks. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess it's also a good. I guess I forgot to mention that. Is that we are actually watching Hulk Hogan wrestle, and that is a big deal at this time, because basically the way it worked is that at the time WWF, their big money wasn't on TV; it was on the live, on the ticket sales on the live shows. So in terms of like weekly television that you could watch at the time, Hulk Hogan ain't wrestling those shows, brother. You got to pony up the money to see Hulk Hogan wrestle. It was basically the main show at the time was called WWF Superstars, and basically what you'd see is every match was like a named wrestler that you care about and a jobber, and then all the matches go like less than 5 minutes, and the named guy wins easy. The end. And like there'd be interviews and stuff like story advancement, but when it comes to like getting to see the champ. No, you got to pony up for to buy a ticket to go see the champ wrestle. You got to buy a pay-per-view to see him wrestle, of which there was only like 2 or 3 a year at this point. Or Saturday night's main event is when he would do that. He would wrestle big matches on the NBC special. So this was like the only time on free TV that he was going to wrestle. So that was in itself a big deal.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, that's crazy.
It's an absolutely, it's weird to think back on because when I've come into being a wrestling fan, long by the late 1990s, they had shifted their perspective and it was all about TV, 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 get TV ratings. So like all the big stars wrestled or appeared every week. Like it stopped being like this weird special occasion to see the best of the best get in the ring. And by now that's just the way it is that all the major champions are going to have a weekly presence as opposed to back in the day. And, there's differing opinions on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that is everything I wanted to talk about in terms of the WWF in 1987. And so I think we're ready to go ahead and pause this stream for a little bit and get to watching some old-timey wrestling, which I'm excited about because I've never seen these shows myself. I know about the big moments that come out of them,
dang.
But I have never actually watched them. So this is a new experience for me as well.
Oh, that's going to be interesting. Oh, I'm really excited now.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm going to...
Outstanding.
We're going to end the stream here and come back in just a little bit. October 3rd, 1987. And I got to say, kind of an interesting film,
Yeah, there was a lot. I'm trying to find a good way to like put it into words, but like after last week, which was kind of my introduction to all of this in the wrestling world, it kind of brought me up to speed with how it feels relatively in the modern day.
Yeah.
And then this time we jumped back a good 25 years because last week was from like 2011, right?
It's 2013 to 1987.
Okay, 2013. So 26 years. So jump back a little less than 3 decades, and all of a sudden everything is very different. First of all, it's got a very 80s feel to it.
Jeez. It's
between like the camera quality itself, the way people are dressed, the way they do the promos in front of that kind of like curtain setup. It feels very of its time. That WWE, in this case WWF, it seems like it's always kind of very good at feeling of its time, even if, as we discussed last week, it kind of lives in its own little bubble of culture.
I would agree with that, especially because I think about it is we'll eventually watch a show from the late 90s because that's the other big boom period in the company's history. So you can't just not ignore that too. And it feels very 90s. And arguably that is when WWE has been its strongest in terms of mainstream popularity, is a real ability to kind of like understand what the audience of that time period wants to see. And kind of making its full presentation fit in that time.
Well, and obviously we'll cover this when we watch the 90s thing, but what fascinates me is you talking about the 90s as like a transitionary period, because for as much as some of this feels similar, there are also just there's just certain je ne sais quoi to it that makes it feel very, very, very different and very detached from what we kind of see today. I think part of it's just kind of like the aesthetic presentational aspects between like the camera quality and it's not as high tech and stuff.
Yeah, they would not go to being high definition until the mid 2000s. So like this is standard definition TV.
But that being said, I can't even fully describe it, but something about the pace, something about the tone, something about the way it's all presented, feels deeply different. Like, I think it's kind of what we were talking about during the show of it's not like you have a person go out and do these kind of like long-winded Shakespearean monologues to the audience. They're with a guy in a tux in front of like a set of pink curtains, giving a promo, giving a mini interview. And I don't know, it kind of creates this difference in pacing, whereas a WWE episode today, like we watched last week, it's almost like a linear episode. It's like an episode of like primetime TV with a linear plot. Like there's an A plot, there's a B plot, there's stuff going on. But whereas this, it feels very different. It feels very everything is given its own like little distinct corner of the episode to do its thing in. Like they'll reference and they'll interact a little bit, but there's not like it doesn't feel like a through line.
It's very segmented
and
in its approach.
Yeah.
And I do think that,
which is fascinating.
And I think part of that is like
go ahead.
How they saw TV at the time, I think affects the way that they write TV. And especially because, as I mentioned on the pre-show, is that like back in these times, it's not necessarily about telling a story on TV. It's more about, well, they are telling a story, but it's not like they treat it like the TV is an avenue to get you to go to see the shows. The TV isn't inherently isn't its own kind. It's different from now, where like TV is the main drive, is the only driving narrative force. One thing you might say now is if you go to an untelevised show now, nothing will happen. Like they'll wrestle matches, but nothing important is going to happen because it's not on TV. Whereas here, they'll save stuff off of matches off of TV for the most part, so that you can keep them for the live crowds, for the untelevised shows, because that's where they made their money. And so if you're not really looking at it as like telling these narratives through television, and it's more of a way to like sell your audience on a show that they'll pay money to see, it's not free, then yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense to kind of do these more segmented, like they're doing these interviews, and then they're going to have their match, and then they do another interview, and that's kind of back and forth.
Well, kind of what when you were talking just now, how they portray their show, how they write their segments, to your mind feels reflective of how the writers saw the TV of the day. And I think about that, and I think about what you said at the beginning of the show of the 80s was almost a time of these characters and these kind of setups feeling very reminiscent of a Saturday morning cartoon and kind of how they present, like whether that be Honky Tonk Man just being this very silly, deeply silly character. Yeah, deeply silly. Like straight up like him, or like the Hart brothers, or
the Hart
stuff
Foundation,
like that.
Yeah.
The Hart Foundation. They read in a sense like Saturday morning cartoon villains. The Hart Foundation, especially with kind of how they do like that silly like distract the ref one and the other goes and like does a dirty cheap trick thing. And I kind of wonder, like, why was that like the kind of cultural the cultural pulse that was latched onto, like trying to emulate that vibe, because it kind of feels like that. Because if you have like a Saturday morning cartoon or something like a Warner Brothers cartoon, they each have their own individual segments. Like they'll share characters and they'll share like they might sometimes have callbacks from one to the other, but they're each their own standalone story. And I still don't know nearly enough about wrestling in this area to kind of put my finger on why, but that's kind of what it feels like to me of
for some reason, that's what they latched onto. I think you made a very apt comparison there. And it's very interesting. And also, what I'm really trying to like get at in my mind that I still can't quite like put my finger on is the very polished contemporary feel of what we watched last week versus the slightly more like I don't want to say faster paced because last week's episode was like fast paced too, but like the way it's presented, like the segments feel I don't want to say like more nonchalant, but like some of the stuff like the Hart Foundation squaring off against those two randos at the as the end of the show.
Yeah, the Young Stallions
felt a lot different than.
It feels weird.
Well, it's weird because to me, for some reason, it feels a lot different. It felt a lot different than like the one Irish dude doing the 2v1, or even the like country singer, whatever, or the rock star guys versus what's his face? Chris Jericho. For something about it feels different, and I don't know if it's like just because the new stuff feels like more contemporary, more polished, and this feels rougher around the edges, but something about it, I can't quite grasp at it, is different to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that could be it. Is that like that's another thing? Is that it is for as much as it's very stylized and 80s, it's still very rough in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. That wrestling just was. It always has been. It always had been. Is if you look at a show from this time that isn't WWF, it's the same. It's the same gruff and gritty kind of appeal, but without any of the glitz, without the same glitz to it.
Yeah. But it's funny too because and I don't like mean to turn this whole post show into like compare and contrast like segment, but
no, I think it's an interesting.
It's funny
discussion
because like the cartoony nature of kind of what we watched this week versus what we watched last week feels like WWE's version of grimdark, basically, of like, we're in like the post Dark Knight era where our superheroes are rough and tumble and gritty and realistic. Where and back in the 80s, these are Saturday morning 90s, cartoon heroes and villains. But it's an interesting dichotomy because on the flip side, for as much as like it feels in a way like modern WWE is trying to go for a bit more like realism, a bit more groundedness, it's got this very shiny polish to it that makes it very obviously fake. Whereas this, it's cartoony, but something about like the fact that it's rough around the edges and the fact that segments feel almost kind of like rushed into. It takes away kind of that kind of outward stylized like theatricality framing device aspect to it, and just plows it through as fighting with a narrative, but with like a stringy narrative behind it. It's a very interesting dichotomy to me.
And that's this is the kind of stuff that like. Not in quite as highfalutin terms as we're talking about here, but this is the kind of stuff that people talk about all the time. When I see people online talk like older fans who remember at least older than now, more before my time of starting being a fan, they'll talk about how like part of what they don't like about WWE anymore is like how like glitzy and hyper and like the HD nature of it, and how like clean it all feels. To them it loses it a little bit because it feel like that to them it adds to the fakeness of it all in a way that older wrestling in the pre-HD days doesn't.
So then my question is, why does the fakeness matter to them? Because it seems like, because from what we discussed last week, it seems, we talked about kind of like that social contract of, we know this is fake, but we're going to buy into it because it's symbolic of something bigger. So like, at what point does that become a turnoff for those older wrestlers? Do you have any pulse on that, or those older fans? I mean,
older wrestlers too. I think if some of them have complained about this kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I'm sure.
Them too. But I think it's a little different than anybody. I think it's all part of like where their suspension of disbelief is willing to be, and not just in terms of like the content they see on the screen, but also the way it just all feels from the way that it's stylized. And like for some people, like even if the content is obviously, is not very much on the level, as you might say, they could more easily buy into it in these older days when it's a little more gritty and it feels a little more real than in today, where the hyper realistic like styling just kind of accentuates how much this isn't actual fighting. This isn't legitimate combat.
Wait, okay. I might have just had an epiphany of maybe what I've been trying to wrap my head around here, because I mentioned to you earlier in tonight's show about how in some respects in others it feels a lot more fake. And I was really thinking. I was like, I've been thinking about that, and I've been like, I'm like, why is that? Like, why do I prefer kind of that contemporary style? And I think what it is, like, or what may trigger that kind of difference in suspension of disbelief, because I like what I've been struggling with is why. I say like what I've been struggling with is like the deep philosophical question I've been asking myself for months instead of just like the past like hour and a half. No, but like I don't know, these questions like consume me. What like when we were watching this, what I was kind of struggling with was like the contemporary nature of like the newer stuff. While it feels very theatrical, there's an emotional core to it that sucks you in, like we talked about last week with the fake retirement, and with kind of the idea of like who these outlandish characters represent. Whereas in what we watched this week, it was a lot more simplified, and it feels kind of more surface level, kind of more like the archetypes don't run quite as deep.
They definitely do not.
Quote unquote deep. Like
this is definitely an era of time.
Like it's either.
This is definitely a time where the good guys are the good guys, and they are morally good in all ways, or are claimed to be anyway. Hogan. Yeah. And the bad guys are all evil, cheating dickheads who laugh maniacally at their own evil.
Yeah. And ironically, that was the part that felt less real to me. That simplicity felt less real. What felt more real was the fighting itself. Like something about like the way the camera angles were, something about the way it was all set up, blah blah blah. I don't know why, but something about it just felt a little more authentic than what we watched last week. And I'm thinking about it, and I think I realized maybe that's suspension of disbelief that the older fans felt for what was there back in the 80s or whatever. I almost wonder if the fast-paced nature has something to do with that. Like on a whole, the narrative itself is very basic and very obviously staged, and like these are very obviously people playing parts. Like the line doesn't feel as blurred. But it moves so quickly from one thing to another that it tricks your brain. It might trick your brain into thinking like it doesn't give you enough time to process kind of the fakeness from one thing to the next, because boom, we're just going into the next fighting segment, and the little quote unquote character moments are a lot more kind of interspersed with that. So I think I wonder if that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea. it's kind of hard for me to speak very well on this, is because I struggle a lot to identify with wrestling the same way from this era of time. Like I'm a thoroughly modern wrestling fan, and like the stuff from what like we watched last week, like to me that is where like my jam is, and where like I really get wrestling, and where is this time period and the late 90s too is I can appreciate a lot of aspects of it, and I can understand why people got so into it the way they did, but it's harder for me to personally feel the same level of connection and get like get hooked on it in the same way. And like maybe if I would have been 17 or whatever in 1987, it would have felt more natural to me to buy into it the same way. But like me in 20 me now and who I am in this time period, I just can't get into it the same way. So it's harder for me.
I'm right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think I prefer the contemporary style here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm right there with you. Because I like things better when they're more drawn out and you can have more of that emotional connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost wonder, like,
which is a bit of a hot take to have in the wrestling fandom, especially because of the fact that, you look at WWF was super popular around this time. It was super popular in the late 90s, and it hasn't ever been as popular in any other time period. So you get a lot of fans who were fans then. And so, like, to say that, like, wrestling in a post 2012 world is like, that's my jam, and not like this old stuff that is considered critically acclaimed and is like the best WWF wrestling. It is a little bit of a controversial take to kind of have that attitude, but that is what I have.
Well, I can understand why, because it's got that feel that things had in the 80s when you could tell they were making a big cultural impact. I think another thing the fast-paced nature says about it is like we're just barreling through from one thing to the next because we want to deliver as much like crazy off-the-wall goodness to you guys as possible. Whereas nowadays it takes its sweet time a little bit more to build things up and to build stronger characters and stuff like that. So I can certainly understand why. I think what I mean when I say emotional connection is like for the fans of the golden age in the 80s, the emotional connection came from like the whole experience, the whole package.
I would agree with that.
Whereas now, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with your point there about the whole kind of the whole thing.
Yeah, no. Whereas I think now when I'm talking about having a stronger emotional connection to things that I felt like watching the contemporary stuff, I think I'm talking about and like a deeper emotional connection to the individual sum of its parts rather than the whole.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be where that comes from too.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seems like a just this divide, this cultural shift in this little microcosm of the world, very unique in how it kind of executed itself.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely
so that's kind of the
it's definitely a very different watch from trying to watch a show from today.
Yeah. So kind of with all of that spoken of, the content itself, for what there was of it, the key standouts were where we had Randy Savage up against
the Honky
Tonk.
Yeah.
The Honky Tonk Man.
Yep.
Honky Tonk Man being represented by that clown in the heart tux. And Randy Savage being represented by poor Elizabeth. Oh God, that was a very. I harped on this a lot when we were watching, but just like poor Elizabeth, man.
No, Bobby Heenan was dragging her name through the mud all night long.
I know, and it was really funny when you said his manager, because I was
like, it's not like Elizabeth did anything.
It was funny when you said his manager. Not like a what?
It's not like Elizabeth did anything that like Bobby Heenan is just jumping on to prove his own point, to justify his own point. He's making up a whole fantasy of Elizabeth secretly being in love with the honky tonk man, and that she kind of just and she's kind of hoping that Randy Savage loses so she has an excuse to ride off in that pink Cadillac.
Oh my god! See that's something So Heenan is a manager to some of these big heels, but he's also an announcer.
Yes, he was kind of playing both roles. I don't really know exactly why he did that way. Probably just because he's a very entertaining personality, and they felt that he worked. And Jesse Ventura was the heel commentator in his spot at the time for a while, and then Ventura left to go make movies in Hollywood, and so they were looking for a replacement, and Heenan was there, and he was always been a company man, and he's a character, I'll say that. So I would imagine is a lot of their reasoning for like putting him in that announcer spot.
So I'm surprised then that they didn't do a similar thing with McMahon of like portraying him as like somebody's manager or some sort of babyface rep aside from just an announcer.
I think that was really just that's truly what Vince McMahon wanted to do. They always say there's always stories about Vince McMahon wishing he had the physique and athleticism to be a wrestler himself, but as in the role of being the owner of the WWF, he was pretty clear. He was like pretty clear that like this is what he wants to be as an on-screen person, and that's it. And it wasn't until 1997, and when we this is not the time or place to talk about the Montreal Screwjob controversy, but I will say that there was a controversy bred from real life drama in 1997 that bled into the show, and people like started to hate Vince McMahon as a person, even though to this point he wasn't necessarily the on-screen boss. And so they decided to lean into that, and Vince McMahon took to the role like a fish to water, and the fans ate it up, so they just kept going.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. But like
but anyway,
being the play-by-play announcer was really as much as he really wanted to do on screen for a long period of time.
Which is funny because he also like inserted himself into that freaking music video at the end.
Yeah, no, that was a little bit of a fun gag. He'd do those kind of gags where he'd make sly little references to the fact that he has more power in this company than you would think he does. But they never explicitly, for a long time, did not explicitly say, he's in charge here. In fact, at this point in time, he didn't end up being relevant, but at the time, they had a whole like fake president character, President Jack Tunney. He was on screen, the president of the WWF, and if any controversy happened, it was his job to show up and take care of business and punish who needed to be punished and do what needed to be done.
What the hell?
Yeah, it is extremely
like some
weird.
Queen Amidala shit right there.
No, yeah, he was just a strictly storyline person in charge.
He was the Keira Knightley to Vince McMahon's Natalie Portman.
I'm here for Linda. I'm here for Linda McMahon killing the Tuscan Raiders.
Yeah. Oh, God. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
We kind of got off track there. Well, it was funny because what I imagined when you said like Savage's manager was something like "What's Your Face" from last week, like the 80s version of it. So like instead of being like leather everything, like kind of like a businesswoman sort of thing.
Oh no. No. She was in her very nice white dress.
Yeah. She showed up on screen in a sequin dress, and I was like,
Mhm.
no.
No, this is a very different.
And
This
then
is
they said
very
Miss
different from what
Elizabeth,
you
and I was
think
like,
it is.
no. Yeah, which I mean,
This,
like, kind of there's not much to analyze there. What you said during the show, just like, the innocent purity, whatever.
like she was the bastion of goodness. She was the most good. She'd never done anything
Yeah.
wrong. She'd never been mean or unkind. So and plus the fact that she's a woman and definitely not a wrestler in any capacity. Like she never gets in the ring and wrestles
Mm-mm.
ever. Not some of these other managers like
Okay, I want an alternate reality where Miss Elizabeth like goes on to become like the first like female superstar. She gets like tough and grizzled.
that would be kind of hilarious to see, just to see how that dynamic would
After
play out.
after getting thrown around by Honky Tonk one too many
Yeah,
times.
no. Like it was just like people putting their hands on her was like the most disgusting thing you could do at this point in time.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's like the we respect women in
Mhm.
they are sweet virginal things to be protected, and if anyone with blatantly impure intentions should try to lay their hands on them, we shall yeet them into the sun.
Yeah. It's a very basic basic thing, morality thing they're playing here.
You know, kind of reminds me of my high school girlfriend's dad. Anyway, um, the big talking point here is her, like, because you were talking about during the pre-show of how Savage would throw her in front of opponents to like keep himself from getting hit.
Right,
But
when
this time she
was
threw
more
herself in front of Honky Tonk.
Yes. There was especially once Savage
She threw
became
herself in front of him.
especially when Savage became the baby face and thus more likely to be the one in trouble from those dastardly heels beating him up. You definitely every once in a while get a real like Elizabeth will actually step in to protect her man and show that valiant
her actual IRL husband.
Yep. Yeah, it was real shup up. Even though at this point there wasn't any explicit romantic undertones. I mean, there was like some it reads a little romantic, especially when we're talking about Savage's jealousy issues. But it wasn't like it was not supposed to be seen as explicitly that they are romantically inclined. It was there was a professional relationship first and romance kind of there for kind of there subtextually for the fans to kind of buy into the idea of, but not necessarily, but it wasn't as explicit.
Yeah. I just looked him up. They were married from like 84 to 92.
Yeah,
nice.
They would actually get married on screen in 1991, both as a way to kind of revive Savage's character, who at the time was kind of like going through a quasi-retirement, but also some IRL reasons. It was a little bit of a let's try to fix our marriage thing, because by 1991 they're out of their IRL relationship was falling apart. And so getting married was almost trying a way to put a Band-Aid on it. It didn't work, but they tried.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, not to get too deep into this kind of gossipy drama, but yeah, basically it was like as time went on, Macho Man's like jealousy and single-minded like obsession with like keeping Liz to himself had finally fractured that relationship enough to make her want to leave.
Yeah. No, I got you. Yeah. So she steps in and gets thrown down by Honky,
which we see so many replays of
being Savage in the head. Yeah. With the guitar, and I think we see more replays of that than Savage getting hit with the guitar.
Yeah, it's also funny is that like how little of a replays we get because like going as you probably could have guessed is coming out of this show the most historically significant moment is Hulk Hogan coming to the aid of Randy Savage, and then instead of them coming to blows, they shake hands and suddenly they're a tag team together. They're the Mega Powers. So it's funny that like relative to this whole like El Kabong with a guitar and Elizabeth getting thrown to the ground, they don't talk nearly as much about the handshake.
Yeah, no, they're just fixating on that for some reason, and that seems weird to me. Like that seems like trying to like just like stretching the bit far too thin. I have no idea decided to like fixate on that when you literally have like gigantic moment of Elizabeth going and getting Hulk, Hulk coming out and tearing into Honky Tonk and the Hart Foundation, and then coming to an agreement with Savage.
Like it's at this point in time, it's the number 1 and number 2 superheroes in the company teaming up. Yeah. And it is not played nearly as big a deal as you'd expect from if I said that sentence.
Yeah, no, it's which the whole air surrounding that was bizarre because looking at last week when we had the fake retirement thing, and Cena getting yeeted, like that was played as huge. Everything about that was gigantic. Like they played it a bunch and they just kept talking about it, and it was like a build up throughout the whole show.
Mm-hmm. And it happens, and then they have the interview at the end. But other than that, it's like we're moving on now. It doesn't even
and the interesting thing too is like
it doesn't even get any time to breathe because they do the handshake, and then the very next match they air is Hulk Hogan versus Sika. So now we're moving on to Hulk Hogan fighting the Wild Savage for the championship. So there's not there's not any real breathing room to talk about. Oh my God, Hogan and Savage putting aside their differences to team up.
Well, that's the fast-paced nature of it, isn't it? Which like, again, before your brain has time to latch on to, wait, this is staged. We're moving on to the next thing, which makes it even more bizarre that they focus so heavily on Elizabeth getting brutalized.
Yeah, it's weird, and
maybe that's.
I wish I could tell you immediately where the storyline goes from this point, but I actually don't know. Like this is kind of like at this point, like the Mega Powers thing at this point is a lot of like them just like starting to work together as a duo and starting to help each other out and occasionally having matches together. Like, but the next big plot beat is actually the show we're going to talk about next time we do 80s stuff. Is the next big plot beat in that whole story.
Yeah. The next one, the most watched, that'll get its own like show special.
Yeah.
But the thing is too, like even the interview they do at the end, it doesn't feel like a cultural moment. Like it does because like there are these two very larger than life people like interacting, and they're doing this neurotic ass handshake thing. I don't know if I want to do it. I don't know if I want to.
You're gonna go back in. It's like,
but it's played almost as like the WWE version of a meet cute. The most big and triumphant moment of that to me, almost it felt to me like the biggest like epic moment of that was Elizabeth pulling Hulk out onto the floor, and Hulk and we get that shot of Hulk looking up and seeing the injustice happening in front of his eyes, and then leaping into the ring. That to me felt like the big moment.
Yeah, which is also, as I joked about, it's like, does Hogan not watch the show backstage? How does he not know what's going on right now? Like, why he comes out. He comes out confused why Elizabeth is pulling him to the ring in desperation, and it's like, do you not know what's happening right now?
but to be fair, that makes for a far better moment because
yeah, it does when he
you can
realizes
almost
and he
hear
does
like
this.
the film score.
Ooh, he does his face.
Yep, you
And
can
he realizes
almost
he's gotta go save the day.
the fucking the fucking face.
Which is
Yeah,
what
no, you can almost hear like the epic film score underneath, like the dun dun, like Avengers is playing, Avengers Assemble playing underneath, and like just leaps in there. It even feels more so than at the end of the match when he's holding up like Savage's hand, like that's its own kind of Rocky moment too. But that moment where he gets brought out, that is like the cinematic money shot right there, and it's the very first part of that kind of arc for the episode, which is so interesting to me.
But yeah, it is definitely the money shot moment of that whole scene. It's fantastic camera work and weird to
I agree.
And weird to say if you've ever seen any of his movies, but great acting by Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's Hulk Hogan playing the character he plays best.
Yeah, that's not to talk too deeply about Hulk Hogan's movie career, but that's also why that never worked out. Really, I think every single goddamn movie, it was Hulk Hogan playing Hulk Hogan, no matter what the scenario
Hulk Hogan
was.
works better as a Gremlins cameo.
Mm-hmm. But like now, Thunder in Paradise, Hulk Hogan on a boat. Santa with muscles, Hulk Hogan as Santa Claus.
Oh my God, Santa with muscles.
Suburban Commando, Hulk Hogan in suburbia. Three Ninjas, Hulk Hogan as a ninja.
I mean, to be fair, probably a similar thing with Muscle Man Randy Savage. Mm-hmm. The role I know him for is Bonesaw McGraw in Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, Randy Savage was just kind of just doing himself on that one. I got you for 3 minutes. Bonesaw, it's ready.
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah. He very much embraced the playing himself.
Absolutely.
But again, to that beginning moment being the climactic one, I think again that speaks to the fast paced nature of like, instead of it being this narrative build up with a lot of kind of like underlying emotions, we get the money shot to start to communicate to the audience something big's about to happen, and then they just plow forward through with it without a second thought.
Yeah.
For someone I can understand. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, this is not a story beat that was necessarily built to. Like this, it kind of the whole arc starts right here. It's not like they were teasing this idea of Hogan and Savage working together in any capacity before this show. It was like Savage was getting even more continuing more popular as a good guy, but like this association with Hogan it was completely new at this show, and it's even played that way. It's not Hogan coming to the aid of a friend. It's Hogan being asked to help because of this grave injustice, and Hogan's sense of moral justice having to step in, and it incidentally leads to Hogan and Savage deciding in the heat of the moment to start working together.
Yeah, and I can understand why for a like serious dedicated fan of the time, how that could work, how it feels like that could be a legitimate way to play, because I don't think you need a lot of build up for that, because it's well established who the hell Randy Savage is, who the hell Hulk Hogan are, how important both of them are. That they fought in the past, and that they've rivaled before so I don't think you need much build up outside of just like bada bing, bada boom, all of a sudden this thing happened, and wait, we realize we can be friends now. Why aren't we friends?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can understand how it feels like that would work, you know, if you were invested in the week by week back then.
Mm-hmm.
I think something else too is like with the fast paced nature versus, you know, the contemporaries more like slow and you know, introspective, quote unquote, for WWE. The latter, maybe another reason I prefer, at least for now, the contemporary style is like it feels more accessible to a newer viewer. It gives you time to catch up, whereas this it doesn't like putz around with any like hardcore playing catch up or anything like that. It just barrels you through.
No, that's something that WWE will focus on a lot more as time goes on. Is this idea of like you gotta like updating, keep like treating it like this could be someone's first show, in that sense of like what, like I don't like if someone watching the show has no idea of any of these characters or any of this backstory, like making it so that they can at least follow the biggest plot beats, if not every plot beat. And that's something that WWF just didn't do a whole lot of last time. Is if you look back then, is like you look at I've watched every WrestleMania, so I can say this for sure. Is that you watch these earliest WrestleManias and they don't explain shit. Like they just throw these matches. They have these big feud ending matches on there, but they don't tell you jack shit except for like the biggest like the Hogan matches. They don't tell you like, oh yeah, this is what this guy was. This is why they're fighting. This is what this guy said, and this guy did this thing. Like no, they're like fuck it, who cares? Like fuck you, just roll with it.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I can definitely see that. And it almost it's kind of its own version of Cerebral in that sense. Where it's so jam packed with very little explanation, you just kind of have to like hop on the train for dear life and hold on.
You just gotta roll with it when
we had that.
When they have, you just got to roll with it when they have this Samoan dude, you know, faking eating a chicken.
Yeah, an unplucked chicken, and has two handlers, which like why two, and why is one of them the Brooklyn Brawler hidden behind a mask?
That I would assume is Kimchi was, I think, created for this character. I think that's like he was designed, and then he would come back to do Kamala when Kamala would come into WWE. But Mr. Fuji was just kind of like a manager of the time. Like we got to meet a few of them during on this show, but in this time in WWE, like having a manager was a huge thing. Like they had a fuckload of managers who have clients and talking for people, and that's been phased out based on I think Vince.
I mean, we saw some examples of it.
We do, but it's definitely not as pervasive to the show as it is now.
Yeah.
As it is, and so
like last week the biggest example was like Del Rio's little LeFou,
right, Ricardo, yeah,
who announced for him.
Yeah,
but or like CM Punk's lawyer that he fires halfway through.
Yeah, but and like that's just the way it goes now. Is that and I've always assumed this is a Vince McMahon thing, but I guess who knows? Is this general idea at least of like wanting guys to be able to stand on their own and talk on their own, because that was the big reason they had managers in the first place. Is that you get these big muscly guys in here. That doesn't mean they're inherently charismatic. That doesn't mean they're inherently like charismatic and good at playing a character on television. And it's like, well, we don't want the audience to think they're boring. So we're going to have these managers. They're going to do all the talking. They're going to tell the story. They're going to be the interesting character. And so that the big, giant, muscly guys can just be that. because they're not good at they're not good at the interview stuff.
Which is funny because Sika felt like the most like his like in-ring work looked the most real to me. Like it looked like he was just a straight athlete who was doing a bit because that's what the company like makes him do. But he's like actually just kind of like a strong dude who's going out there to have a fight. Which was really interesting.
Sika was a pretty solid wrestler in his day, for sure.
So it does I think maybe lend some credence to like, you know, if you can hire like nowadays the focus seems more on hiring like actor athletes who can do a bit of both, but like back then the presence of managers who could kind of take up some of the talking, maybe that like allowed a bit more focus on the athleticism for the wrestlers themselves, and that's maybe why to me some of the stuff looked more real.
And it was also, I think that's a product of its time of wrestling as an athletically has developed a lot, as you would note, as you saw from 87 to 2013, the way wrestling had developed as an in-ring like style and fight. And this is more of an era of, it's not necessarily, it doesn't look more real in the sense that like all of their punches and shit are still fake as hell. But it's more focused on like stuff you might try in a fight. Like there's not a whole lot of like real wrestling maneuvers, and there's not a lot of acrobatics and athletics that you would see in a more modern show. It's a lot of straightforward, as I call them, punching and kicking fests, because that's mostly what they're doing in there.
It feels a bit less choreographed, I think.
That's a great word
at least to me. Like the most choreographed feeling things were like is like any time one wrestler like flipped the other in a somersault over their back or something.
Like the selling of moves is still insanely silly as well, as you're talking about ways that it looks fake.
Sometimes, but sometimes I feel like, and maybe it's like the lack of close-ups and stuff, because because there are a lot of close-ups now when someone gets like a bad hit, or bad hit put on them. They'll give a close-up and the person just and we see like their fake pain face, but from the camera work here, I don't think it was as intense on that, and so you could feel the hits, and then you didn't see like the reaction being fake. And they were able to sell the physicality of it, I think, a little better to make it come off as a little more like gritty.
Yeah, that's a fair take. The style of camera work has also been the thing that has changed over time.
It was I kind of noticed that, because it had some similarities of kind of like some of the movement, how like the dynamics of the camera and all that. But there were things that felt different too, like a lot more and again, part of this is because the focus on managers. There's a bit more of a focus on like what's going on outside of the ring, and the close-ups came more for like during after the impact, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But brilliantly, it kind of lends its own style and its own sense of realism to it. So I'm here for it.
Oh yeah, I am as well. It's kind of nice. Is that like, I don't talk a little bit about like the wrestling I watch right now. Is that like you've seen a modern WWE production, and I gotta say, is it something that I like a lot? As I watch New Japan Pro Wrestling, and they have completely different style of camera work, and the big thing for them is actually there's not a lot of cuts. Or like there is, but you see a lot. If you really look at it in WWE, like almost every like major impact has a camera cut to a different angle. And in New Japan, that's not the same way. They like for big moments, they let the camera stay on it and like let you feel the impact that way. And this kind of felt a little bit like that. Felt a little more reminiscent to like what I see with New Japan now. It's like you can like they let the shot linger on hits, and in that way it kind of makes it feel, I think, a little less fake and a little more engaging. But that's just me.
No, I think I agree. It's kind of that it's kind of that, like, again, the rough around the edges versus the very neat and polished. I think the kind of the lack of fast cuts, the lingering, the whatever, kind of pushes the envelope on that a little bit, whereas contemporary doesn't do that as much. Also, real quick, you wanted to talk about since you didn't really get to during the pre-show, you wanted to talk about King Kong some.
That was a little bit of a joke in the sense that, like, King Kong Bundy's not a super major player in this show or at this time anymore.
Oh, okay.
But it is always kind of fun to see some of these older wrestlers that are kind of like regarded as legends, but they weren't like the biggest stars in their own time, and just kind of it's kind of fun to see some of these characters, because especially at this time in WWE, like, because the cartoony characters was their jam, there is a lot of super memorable characters from this time period. And we don't, there's so many from this era that I can think of to be like, oh dude, it's so, like, I really love watching them that you didn't get to see on this show. And Bundy's always kind of funny to me because he's kind of generic as a big guy, but I don't know, he's always had this charm about him that I've liked. He's not my favorite or anything, but I've always kind of liked King Kong Bundy a little bit.
He again, it's kind of a similar thing to Sika, where, like, he doesn't do much talking. He just kind of goes and he does his fight, and he's damn good at it. And he's a big dude, and even though he's not, like, talking, there's still, like, clearly a sort of pathos to him as he, like, you know, goes and consults with Andre, who comes out during the match and stuff like that.
Which I did not know he did that, because again, I haven't watched this show. So the most is I saw the results on the Wikipedia page, so I did not know that Andre came out on this show. And that was, it was kind of nice.
Which, it was cool. It was cool that he did. I always forgot that he was around, like, for that long.
No, he was in wrestling for like 20 years. And sometime I need to go back and watch some old Andre stuff, because, like, by the time he got big in WWF, like, but by the time we hit here, he's already, like, he physically is losing it. Like, he can still move, technically,
he's starting to slow down,
but he's slowing down. He can't, if you watch some Andre match, some of his his newest matches, I guess, if you say it like that, some of his last matches, like, a big way they build around, like, he is so, like, in pain and struggling, he has to lean against the ropes the most of the match, and the other wrestlers have to work around that. But, like, Andre in his prime is super nimble for someone who is 7 foot tall, 500 pounds. And that's always something that fascinated me to look at, but I've just never really taken the time to do so. And it's not always easiest to find, because stuff wasn't as well televised when Andre was in his prime. So there's a lot less there.
Which is unfortunate.
It is.
The other really interesting thing too is he also seemed kind of clearly overwhelmed in that environment, like as he was walking back through the crowd, you could tell he looked worn out, and, like, as, like, fans, especially, like, there were a lot of, like, kids up against, like, the rail that were, like, kind of, like, reaching out to him. He just kind of, like, waved him off and kept walking.
He can't really, like, interact. He's just barely got enough energy right now to do what he has to do, which for this match was basically walk out there, stand, and then grab Paul Orndorff at the end.
Which is really funny because as we were talking about during the show, this show was taped, like, a little bit before Princess Bride came out, and then premiered, like, a little bit after the movie, like, premiered. And during that, like, we have a slightly more active Andre, who, by all accounts, was just an absolute cinnamon roll to work with.
And he's going to be heel for at least another year or two from this point on. Like, I don't remember exactly.
Wait, how much longer did he go on rest?
I think
he officially go on with the company.
He officially retired, I believe, in 1991, but he is well beyond being a regular wrestler. He is very much in a I'm going to do the big matches kind of wrestler. But he's still a heel character for at least another year. I don't remember exactly when he goes back. He finishes his career as a babyface, but I don't remember when exactly.
Yeah.
But he has a future.
Yeah. Which again, I was kind of wondering if
he has 2 more matches with Hogan. One of which is we've already set up to watch, and one of them we'll probably never watch because I don't like because the show that he did it on is terrible and long.
Oh, yeah.
But we still have a Hogan Andre match to watch at this point in time.
Jesus, it's which again I kind of wondered out loud during the thing if his superstardom had played a role in his turning face at the very tail end of his career, just so he could go out on a high note.
I'm not sure, or that could have played a part in it, or it might have just been Andre's been a baby face most of his career, and we know that he is running out of time. So let's just go ahead and let it.
Yeah.
Now that his story with basically Hogan was his only major heel feud. As soon as he was kind of done being Hogan's ultimate giant to slay, he went back to being the babyface. Yeah. And so once that wrapped up, they're like, well, let's just go ahead and make him a good guy again because people want to cheer for Andre.
Yeah. That's it's it even just that small little clip was kind of heartbreaking to watch because again you can as soon as you point out he was slowing down, I was like, oh shit, you're right. But still it's very interesting that he had this happened right around the time that the movie that now makes him known by everybody in the mic that he had this happened right around the time that the movie that now makes him known by everybody in the modern day came out.
Yeah. And that's so funny that has become such a big part of his legacy.
I mean, it is kind of cool though because again he kind of now gets to be remembered in a lot of ways as this this kind of sweet gentle giant cinnamon roll with how he kind of presented himself.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of part of people remember that he fought Hogan, but the fact that he was this villainous monster isn't really as remembered as well outside of the wrestling fans.
Yeah, which is kind of cool. I think at least. So yeah, so those are kind of I think those were kind of all the big memes of the match. It's like I said, the kind of segmented nature makes it very different to talk about because instead of kind of combing through it as a whole cohesive narrative like we did last week, we're just kind of touching on segment by segment. I do want to throw out there that the Pile Driver music video was a trip. Oh God, that music video! Yeah, quick question, I guess, about stuff like that. Does WWE just throw out random experiments in new pop culture and engaging in new sections of pop culture like that every once in a while, or was that kind of a more standalone thing? Or
every once in a while, it's not very big, and it mostly comes during these boom periods. They don't really try these kind of ventures except when they're at their most popular. But they released 2 albums during this time period. They will do another one in 2002 that is even worse. So, oh my God. But these music videos are these 2 albums anyway. In the 2002 one, fully original songs written for the wrestlers to sing, and they suck. But for this song, for these albums, is like some stuff that is like character driven, and some of it is like covers of popular music at the time, like Mean Gene Okerlund, who's the interviewer guy that we saw, like he sings "Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo" by Rick Derringer, and there, oh yeah, okay. And Jimmy Hart, he writes music actually, and he was writing a lot of the songs from this time period, and he sings a song about how he's way cooler than Rick Springfield, and Rick Springfield ain't shit. Roddy Piper sings a song called "Fuck Everybody," but PG.
Oh God.
Like, it's absolutely bizarre to see these albums, just to listen to this music, because it's so not good. But
I mean, at least some of them were good singers.
Yeah, but some of them aren't, and they get put here anyway.
Did we ever get Hulk Hogan doing a power ballad?
Well, yes and no. In that, not on these albums. He barely sings at all. He has like maybe one line across 2 albums, even though they plaster his face on the cover. But
yeah,
Hulk Hogan has his own musical album called Hulk Rules, and he sings on the whole damn album. He sings every song. He raps a bunch. It's all terrible.
Oh no!
It's a thing that happened. That's the best I can say. It's a thing that happened.
Oh, I gotta listen to that. Oh God,
we should at some point, because it is an absolute trip of an album, where you get to hear Hogan sing, you get to hear his wife sing, you get to hear Jimmy Hart sing, you get to hear the whole Hogan family.
The Von Hogan family.
Yep, it's terrible.
Oh God.
Because Hogan's not much of a singer or a rapper as you might have expected.
So we're definitely going to have to cover that for an episode at some point. Mm-hmm. Oh boy. Oh God. Well, I think that's a brilliant note to leave this episode on.
Oh yeah, so the Hulk Rules album.
The Hulk Rules album. Again, another crazy bit of shenanigans for our audience to look forward to.
And if it's not, I'm sure it's not surprising to hear, but pretty much every song on the album is about how awesome Hulk Hogan is. There's not
I would have thought they would be like.
There's not a whole lot of variety in terms of what he was.
I was envisioning like transcendental meditations on the nature of the universe.
Nope.
A philosophical deep dive into the human condition.
You see, I kind of want to see someone. It's like you take someone else's deep dive into the human condition, and then Hulk Hogan reads it. Hulk Hogan
it's like the it's the opposite of the RPG character I made of Cyborg, Scott Steiner.
Yes.
Actually, you know what? Here's gonna be my challenge to myself. When we eventually cover the Hulk Rules album, I'm going to fall into a piece of philosophical genius. I'm going to challenge myself. I will find a way.
You're gonna find something real deep in these songs.
It's like oh God, we're getting slightly inside jokey here, but it's like I can't remember. Wait, I think it was one of 2 friends, but I can't remember exactly. I just remember hearing someone talk about how they were at a drunk PowerPoint party, and they were like a film student, and somebody like gave a drum analysis of The Room.
I wasn't here
with legitimate. I wasn't here for it either, but like it's a story I've heard, and it was either like one of our friends or it was like Lindsay Ellis. Mm-hmm. or it was like, or something like, no, I think it was like a rando like Tumblr post or something like that. But like somebody at a drunk PowerPoint party like did a legitimate like film analysis of the room using like all the stuff they like learned from film class, and then the person like watching realized that like film analysis is bullshit.
Incredible. Yeah, this is a
so
fantastic.
I'm gonna destroy music analysis by reading philosophy into
into Hulk Hogan.
Anyway, so yes,
this has been this actually went a little longer than I expected it to. I wasn't sure we'd get like an hour, minutes out of it.
Solid 3 hour session.
Yeah. I feel like this is a good time to be like, what are we going to do next time? But I also don't totally know. I have a few thoughts.
I thought next time we were going to do the big one. I thought we were going to do the big one next time.
Yeah, I guess we should, is to kind of continue the arc. I was when I thought this was one episode, I was not totally sure where we go next, is because I have a few ideas. Is like kind of WWE in the 90s. To kind of bring us full circle here on the different types and the different evolutions of WWE. I was thinking maybe we hit a little. We've kind of kept it unintentionally, mind you. This is kind of like a very tame time of wrestling, and especially paired off with this like 80s goofball family kid friendly cheese that is this era of wrestling, to kind of jump into some of the hardcore wrestling times, get a little violent with weapons. And also I've been talking up a ladder match. Ladder matches, especially the ladder match thought those are really fun to kind of bring that in there, but it's hard because most of those are on pay-per-view, and I don't know if we're up to a time to really do a pay-per-view in terms of a time to watch, but I'll think about it and see and think. And
leave it up to you.
Yeah. And eventually, of course, I want to do Lucha Underground, because that is maybe my favorite wrestling show ever. 1, 2, it requires zero explanation. It is its own It is its own continuity with references to the past for these to the wrestlers' past, but like going forward, not all the story there. What's happening there is all that happens.
Yes.
So it's much more interesting to follow.
I'm so hyped for Lucha Underground.
It is absolutely an insane ride and one of my favorites. But yeah,
brilliant.
That is totally for next time, whenever that ends up being. So this is Austin signing off.
Thank you all for watching.
Thank you all for watching.
And this is David signing off.
Bye.